Okay, hello everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Black Box Podcast. Today we're going to be visiting one of the older mysteries out there. This is the 1961 disappearance of Joan Risch from Lincoln, Massachusetts. Now, I will say this is probably going to turn into quite a long upload. I'm getting that feeling from the start because there are so many things to go over. And furthermore, I would like to say I know people have had a lot of time to review this case in the amount of time since 1961, but there is just so much information out there, so many details to go through. And I would also like to say, just beginning, that this is one case that has really taken on a very large personal interest in this case because it is one of the few that I've actually had the chance to discuss with somebody in my personal life, that we've actually had discussions back and forth, debating and promoting ideas and this and that. And yeah, most people I know have absolutely no interest in true crime or missing persons and unsolved mysteries. So after getting through quite a lot of these discussions, I really think that there going to be quite a lot we can talk about, and I would love to hear what more people have to say. So, let's get started. Just going to read a little background information. On the morning of October 24th, Martin Risch, husband of Joan Risch, got up early and left for the house in his car to the Logan Airport to catch an 8 a.m. flight to New York. It was a business trip. Shortly after his departure, Joan woke up and served them breakfast. She took her son across the street to the house of a neighbor, Barbara Barker, and left in her car a 1951 blue Chevrolet. And she took her daughter Lillian with her, and they went to the dentist in Bedford, Massachusetts, and a dentist that had been recommended to her. Following the appointment, she took Lillian on a brief shopping trip to a nearby department store, paying in cash. And at the family home on Old Bedford Road, milk and mail were delivered while the Risches were absent. Neither the milkman nor the postman reported anything unusual at the residence when questioned later. After picking up David at the Barkers, Joan and the children returned home at roughly 11:15 a.m. Shortly after, a delivery driver for a dry cleaner came to the house to pick up several of Martin's suits, and he entered the house and did not recall anything out of the ordinary about Joan or the house. Following his visit, Joan changed from the more formal clothing she had worn to the dentist's and her shopping into a blue house dress and white sneakers. Okay, as you see, already, many things to go over. Let's cut straight to the important part, right? Shortly before 2 p.m., Joan came out again and took the children back across the street to the Barkers' house. She told the two she would be back. Lillian later told the police she did not see anyone else in the area at that time. She and Douglas played on a swing set from which they could not see the Risch house. They could not see the Risch house, okay? Alright, now this is the important thing. Around 2:15, Barker briefly saw Joan wearing what she thought was a trench coat over her clothing. She saw her move quickly up her driveway carrying something red with outstretched arms from her car towards the garage. At this time, she assumed the neighbor was chasing one of the children. It was the last confirmed time anyone saw Joan Risch. Doesn't that just sort of kind of strike you in a weird way? I mean, like, you see your neighbor across the street, she's carrying something red with outstretched arms, and people have been just debating for decades, what on earth could that be? Okay, now we're going to jump ahead a little. Barker took Lillian back home at 3:40 p.m., intending to take her own children out on a shopping trip with her. Believing Joan was still in the house, when she returned at 4:15, Lillian came back to the Barkers' house. "Mommy is gone, and the kitchen is covered with red paint," she told Barbara. Her brother was crying in his crib as his diaper needed to be changed, And after Barbara went to the Risch house for herself, she verified the account and called the police at 4:33 p.m. So you see, there is an enormous amount of detail in all of this information, and it's going to take quite a while to get through it all, but some of the big things we have to know about Joan. She is a housewife, she has 2 children, and she has just recently had a baby. He's still in diapers, sleeping in the crib, and at the time of her disappearance, she has left the baby in the crib in a dirty diaper. I mean, not necessary to say she left him in a dirty diaper. She left him before changing him. Alright, so what happens next is that the police arrive. Yes, there's blood all over the walls. The telephone is ripped loose and thrown into a wastebasket, which had been taken from its usual place under the sink, left in the middle of the floor. There are 3 bloody fingerprints in the house, which could not be matched to anyone, and Joan was not there to provide a sample, so they couldn't match something to hers. That's going to be very important. Okay, because that's really going to determine maybe how many people were in the house. There was a telephone directory in the kitchen which was found open to the page where emergency numbers could be written down, although none had been. Martin Risch explained that an empty liquor bottle found in the wastebasket was one he and his wife had finished the night before, but could not explain where empty beer bottles found in it might have come from. Joan Risch had left behind the trench coat she had worn to the dentist that morning, but appeared to have taken a plainer cloth coat. Also in the house was her pocketbook. Investigators determined that after purchases since cashing the check the previous evening, she would have had less than $10 or $80 in today's standards left. Now, right now, there's going to be a lot more information later. What on earth was she doing? What on earth happened? There is blood all around the kitchen. There is blood in the garage. There is a phone in the wastebasket. The telephone directory is open to the emergency numbers, but none were called. No doubt she was bleeding. And we need to find out, what really was going on there. We're going to say that there are a couple major theories here. One, an intruder entered the house and that she was assaulted, and, that person tried to conduct some form of foul play. Number 2, Joan had a miscarriage, and she lost her baby, she lost her child, sadly, and that the blood began to pour out of her body, and in a disoriented state, she left the house trying to get help, and then just met some tragedy along the way. 3, this was not just a miscarriage, but this was an abortion, meaning that abortion was illegal in 1961, because it wasn't until the early 1970s when abortion became legal in America. So abortion is still legal at the time. And that's possibility 3, this was an abortion. Or number 4, that she faked her own disappearance. Let's talk a little about number 4. What do you mean, she faked her own disappearance? If you're tuning into this one, you probably have some familiarity with the case, but in reality, in the wake of the disappearance, a journalist named Serene Garrison, who was the reporter for the Fence Viewer, that's a Lincoln, Massachusetts local newspaper at the time, went to the town's public library to research similar cases. And she found the book on Brigham Young's 27th wife and found that Joan Risch had been reading it as well. She had checked out the book. In another book, Into Thin Air, about a woman who like Risch, left behind blood smears and a towel before she went missing. Garrison again found that Risch's signature was on the card, meaning that, to give the nutshell version of what happened here, this journalist goes to the library to learn about mysteries. She picks up one book about disappearances and opens to the back card and learns, hey, that's kind of a coincidence. Joan Risch read this. She picks up the second book, Into Thin Air, and she's like, wait, Joan also read this book. And the exact number is the report findings that Risch, a regular borrower of books, had taken out 25 books over the summer of 1961, many of which had to do with murders and missing persons. Now, you're going to hear that in a lot of these discussions on the disappearance of Joan Risch. Many people report that, saying that all 25 books were about murders and disappearances. Again, I'm just reading off of this here that says that only many of them were. I don't have an exact figure on that, and some people have said that they have the exact number, but that has slipped my mind. They've actually, gone back and looked at all the titles. And based on this, Gerson and her journalistic colleagues believe that this is entirely possible, that Risch had staged the apparent crime scene and disappeared voluntarily. Wow. I mean, you have so many theories already. You just have, this woman who, is appearing to be 100% normal. And then she's just going about a normal day, takes her kids to, one kid to be, a play date across the street, another kid's in the crib, she goes to the dentist, does some shopping, and then it's just boom, all of a sudden, blood is in the kitchen, and she has vanished, and she is never heard from again. And, it's well, which one was it, Was she murdered? Was this an accident? Was this a natural cause? Did she lose an enormous amount of blood from her miscarriage? Or was this a faked disappearance? And, we're going to go through many, many, many parts of this, so please stay with me for a part 2.